And again, peace family, I'm Brother DJ with Us Lifting Us Economic Development Cooperative. And this is another Sonetta exclusive. Brother Sonetta is here in Atlanta. We summoned him down to come down and engage in some serious work with the family in Atlanta. And a part of our conversation is that I wanted him to interview and dialogue with some of the key elders in the Atlanta community. And so I had to really lay out to get Brother Sonetta to commit to even making a 20-hour trip to Atlanta. I had to lay out something to him that was so powerful and convincing. Once I just kind of gave him a snippet of the story, the brother said, I'm there. You know, I got to get this, and because the family needs to hear this story. So without any further ado, I want to introduce to you all Baba Hekima Kanyama and his wife Mama Tamu Kanyama, and we're going to go into some of their history in our movement. But the first thing I want to throw out there or ask is for Baba Hekima to kind of give his early development, where he's from. And how he grew up, and what are some of the things that actually led him to the university where he and Mama Tamu eventually met. So just give us a little bit of your history in terms of early development.
Greetings, family. I'm originally from Charlotte, North Carolina, and graduated from high school in '60. And of course, the sit-ins were around in the South and in Charlotte and other communities, and of course, you know, the water fountains, you know, and other signs designating these as white only tools or facilities were prominent, you know, segregation in that sense. So when I got to the university, I went to North Carolina Central University in Durham. We talked about Durham a little earlier in terms of Black Wall Street, but when we got there, I joined CORE very early and became a part of the sit-in demonstrations.
What is CORE?
Congress on Racial Equality, and under the leadership of Floyd McKissick. And so we were demonstrating at the lunch counters, at the restaurants, and any number of places. And so my first arrest occurred in Durham as a part of the sit-in movement. And of course, I had the only experience of seeing Malcolm in person on our campus at North Carolina Central, but I only saw him from the back because the administration had run him off campus. And but that was the height of the Vietnamese, you know, the war in Vietnam as well. And so when I graduated in '66, to duck the draft, I joined Volunteers in Service to America, the domestic Peace Corps, so to speak, and got shipped off to Chicago. And on the south side of Chicago, there were two institutions that impacted me greatly. Communiversity with Dr. Bobby Wright, Andy Thompson, Jay Carruthers, and others, and also the Black People's Topographical Research Center. And so from the civil rights environment and the sit-ins in the South, then to the Black nationalist, Pan-Africanist perspective, and of course the Nation of Islam there as well. By the way, my mother became a member of the Nation of Islam, so part of my influence very early was sitting in the mosque every week. And I never became a member, but heavily influenced. So while in Chicago, to go to graduate school, I moved to Wisconsin to go to the School of Graduate Work at the Milwaukee campus of the University of Wisconsin. And so that was where she and I began to connect. But from the civil rights movement and sit-ins, being pissed on, being cut with glass that the racists would throw at us, to then being in the environment, very nourishing environment of the community on the south side of Chicago, and then going to Milwaukee and a part of the Black the movement to infuse black studies on the university campus.
Mama Tamu, if you don't mind, talk to us a little bit about your early history and also what led you to the university where you eventually met Baba Hekima.
Thank you. Well, in my early years, I'll have to say that I was influenced not with the interaction with my grandmother, but with the stories that were told about her. Because I lived in, my family and I lived in Wisconsin, and she was still here in Georgia. But I would hear these stories about her and how she dealt with the Caucasians at the time, and that the time when she was coming up, it was very, very dangerous for black people in any sense of the word. But I respected the things that I heard about her. One of my favorite stories was that during those years, oftentimes and most often, black women and black girls had to work in the homes of the white folk. And this was something that my grandmother said she would die and go to hell before she'd let my mother work in their homes, because she knew what could happen in those homes. So that was one thing, but there were many stories about her. Then, and I was also influenced by my older brother, who was a very positive figure in my life and very positive about black people. Just hanging around with him, and he had no brothers, so I would be his little brother. And you know, he would talk about, you know, our plight as a people, and I didn't quite understand things that he talked about, but after I got older, you know, I reflected on it and I could see where he was coming from at that time. Then later on, during my high school years, we had our high school was all black, and we were getting a new high school in our community. And when we were actually slated to get this new high school, they wanted to bus us out and let the white folk come over there, and we would go to the south side to their school. Well, I was a part of that struggle to help to keep our school black. And by the time we got the school, I had graduated, but you know, I still hung in there with that fight, and it was victorious. We got our school. Then also there were during the civil rights movement, I remember there was a Catholic priest who was leading a march to Washington from Milwaukee, and my mom and I would, you know, fried chicken and make picnic baskets, if you will, and take it to them. I could never see myself following, although the ideas were great that he talked about, but I just couldn't quite get behind him. I wanted somebody that looked like me that I would follow, or you know, walk side by side with. Then, of course, later I met Hekima, and then his involvement with the Republic of New Africa was just a whole new world that opened up to me. I was just so into it. It was like, this is what I've been looking for all my life. And that was the beginning of my really, really getting involved with the black struggle.
Baba Hekima, talk to us a little bit about the connection that you two had on the university campus, and where the political aspects of our people, where we were at that time, and some of the things that you got involved in through the Republic of New Africa that eventually led to several other things. But just kind of give us a little bit of that history in terms of the initial meeting and your political influence on Mama Tamu.
Well, this was a time, 67, 68, when black students on white campuses were highly motivated. In other words, our struggle in the streets influenced everybody. I often talk about the fact that I can remember little shorties, little brothers and sisters, 3 and 4 years old, with their little fists in the air, saying brother and sister, and it was a norm. And so certainly those of us on the white campuses and the black campuses as well were influenced. And so we were involved in a movement to infuse black studies into the curriculum on the campus. And so my wife and I and others went to Ithaca, New York, to a national conference on black studies. And it was at that conference that the Republic of New Africa, that was founded in '68 out of Detroit. And by the way, when it was founded, Robert Williams, who was then in exile in China, was elected president. Betty Shabazz Malcolm's widow, was elected vice president. Several other people had ministries. Karenga had a ministry. H. Rap Brown had a ministry. Imam Baraka had a ministry. So it was a collection of thinkers and scholars and activists around the country. So they, at the convention in Cornell, well, it was Cornell, it wasn't Ithaca, it was Cornell University, wherever the city is. They made a presentation, and hundreds of us, students, became citizens of the Republic of New Africa, a provisional government. And so after that conference, we went back to our respective cities. And then the Republic of New Africa reached out to us and convinced us to begin to organize locally there in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, what would be called a government unit or a consulate. And so we came together around the work of building a presence of the Republic of New Africa in Milwaukee. In addition, the building where we actually acquired to do that work was shared with the Black People's Topical Research Center out of Chicago. So in one location, we had both of these dynamic forces taking place and influencing us as well. And of course, this is 68, 69, 70. And of course, one of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit more extensively is what happened in 1971. I'm not sure you're ready to go to that. But as a part of our work in building and expanding the presence of the provisional government, the RNA, in Milwaukee, I later became a national leader, and I emerged as a vice president. And in 1971, my wife and I drove from Milwaukee to Jackson, Mississippi, on our way to North Carolina. Sometimes we explain it a little differently. But the Republic of New Africa was on J. Edgar Hoover's list of organizations and institutions to infiltrate, to destroy, as a part of the COINTELPRO operation. The same tactics that were used for the Panthers and for the attacks on progressive organizations, we were a part of that as well. And by and large, the Republic of New Africa were youth. You know, we were in our mid-20s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're mid-20s and early 20s. And the leadership was young as well. Imari Obadeli was older. As the president, Sister Dara Bubakari was older as an official as well. But myself and, for instance, Chokwe Lumumba, our brother who became mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, he and I were the young guns, so to speak. So again, in our mid-20s. And so the Republic of New Africa had two houses that they used as headquarters in Jackson, Mississippi. And because we were guests in the cities, we were able to rest overnight before our trip further to North Carolina. And it just so happens that the FBI and the local police had planned to raid the houses I'm sure that when they saw that myself and other people who were in leadership were all in the same place at the same time, they prepared. just to give you an idea
And
of
this is the FBI along with local authorities?
FBI and local authorities. So on the morning of August the 18th, 1971, they initiated a raid on a residential house in a black community, a wood frame house, totally surrounded the house. Media was present. There had been a armored personnel carrier borrowed from another state, borrowed from Shelby County, Tennessee. Same armored personnel carrier that Kennedy's assassin,
Okay. Yeah. Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oswald, had been King's assassin.
Oh, King's assassin.
King's assassin in Memphis. In Memphis, the same armored personnel carrier that he had been in. So that armored personnel carrier ended up in Mississippi. Again, the press was there. Refreshments were there. You know, when the community began to let us know what had happened, you know, they were ready for a picnic. You know, they were ready
for.
for.
This was going to be in '71 equivalent to a modern day lynching.
Exactly.
That they were coming to get some entertainment out of it.
Yeah. And so what occurred is that at sunrise, they announced on a bullhorn that you have 75 seconds to come out of the house as the FBI and local police come out of the house.
So you all were in the house.
We were in the house.
How many people total were in?
7 in our house and 4 at the other house. Okay. Now, and the reason we can say what the FBI said, because we didn't hear it, because we were asleep. But
so
the
real early in the morning.
Real early in the morning. But the FBI, who actually was at the bullhorn, got on the stand and said basically what he said. So he identified himself as the FBI and local police one time. And gave us 75 seconds to come out of the house. And they never identified themselves again. Now, in our house, all of us were asleep. In the other house, people were up doing work. And so when the FBI and local police surrounded that house, people came out and said, what are you here for? We could have done the same thing. None of us in either house were wanted for anything. Clean records, everything. But in our house situation where we were asleep, after the 75 seconds, then they began to shoot into the house. They say that they didn't shoot bullets. Well, they say they only shot tear gas projectiles. But glass is breaking, plaster is falling off the wall. You know, those tear gas projectiles are lethal weapons. They're shot from, and so we, of course, were prepared to defend ourselves. And, of course, we had been attacked. The RNA had been attacked earlier, maybe in '68. There was a shootout at Aretha Franklin's father's church. And in that situation, a police officer was wounded and died as well. And, of course, everybody in the church was arrested. And a courageous judge, Judge Crockett in Detroit, released everybody. And he was, vilified for that. But anyway, in our situation, after 75 seconds, and when they began to shoot into the house, we returned fire. At some point, we realized that there were uniformed officers outside.
So they began firing on the house.
Yes.
What is it like in the house as these shots are coming through? Projectiles, plaster falling from the walls. What's that environment like, Mama Tamu, for you all, as the federal authorities and local police began to shoot up the house, and you see people begin to return fire in self-defense?
It seemed at first just like total chaos, because you're waking up to a barrage of bullets and tear gas, what I perceive to be bullets and tear gas, and you're smelling this, you're choking on it, and you're trying to get some clothes on. So it was just like a nightmare.
And of course, with her and the other sister that was in the house, there were 2 sisters. One of the young brothers came to them and pulled them to safety. because the youth who were there had been expecting an attack, not from the police, but from the vigilantes in the Klan. They had bored a hole in the floor. So they grabbed the sisters and immediately took them down underneath the structure. Did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I wanted to say that was the brother who came and got us was very young. I think he was like 17 or younger. And these brothers had been trained so well by the leadership that there was no question in his mind about getting us and taking us to safety. When the most impressive thing about that was when he got us in the tunnel, he didn't just get us there. He laid his body on top of us, over us, so that if the bullets came, they would get him and not us. How great is that? I mean, for a young brother. I mean, you're talking about some training. The brothers was ready. They were great.
So you returned fire.
Yeah, a few of us returned fire. And after, it was I who spotted, all of us eventually, not eventually because it wasn't that long, we all went underneath the house.
Okay. So how long was the shootout?
They say 20 minutes. I don't think it was that long.
Okay.
I don't think it was that long. But this is a wood frame house.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay? So the structure was riddled.
Mm-hmm.
I had a brand new car outside. I had a brand new Volvo. that was riddled as well, And but we were not. I bullets were whisking by me, so I sensed that there were shots fired that could have hit me. But again, we all went underneath the house, and for a time that was just the house was just being riddled with bullets, and so. Eventually, from underneath the house in the opening, I spotted a uniformed officer. And then I said, these are police. These are whatever. Let's holler for, for some closure. So we began to holler, stop fire. And so then the fire stopped. And we emerged from the house, and then it took us and put us on the ground. And they say, who is that? Who else is in the house? And we said, nobody. They didn't believe us. Because they couldn't believe that nobody was dead in that house because 3 of them were wounded. One fatally wounded, shot in the head, another shot in the chest, and another shot in the leg.
So the police?
Police.
Oh, they was wounded.
Yeah. So none of us were wounded. Again, it's a miracle. It's miraculous.
This is North Carolina?
This is Jackson, Mississippi. This is Jackson, Mississippi.
In 71.
Yeah. So, so while we were lying on the ground, they continued. When we emerged from the house, and because they didn't believe us, they continued to fire tear gas into the house, and for a good while, they weren't going into the house. But the other thing, I'm sure, was in their minds. Ain't no way y'all gonna get off, and none of you are wounded, and 3 of us are wounded, 1 dead. And so, but by that time, this story is around the world. I mean, it's in Europe, it's in China, it's everywhere. It's a global incident.
Can you show that picture one more time? I'm going to show it on the camera. Yeah, if you keep talking, I'm going to show it right
Okay. And so, again, the picture that you're referring to emerges when we are arrested and taken and marched in the street are pretty much naked. My wife had on a robe, right?
I had a coat
You had a coat?
over my gown.
This is you here.
Correct.
Oh, this is the brother right here.
Okay.
That's him.
And of course, we never had a chance to put on a shirt or a jacket or anything. And so
that's the brother right there talking. That's him.
okay. So we were marched in the streets. In other words, that picture, I don't know who took it, but anyone could have taken it because, again, we were paraded.
Right.
And with the chains. and creative artists later put a poster up with that picture beside a picture of enslaved Africans being marched to the dungeons to go on to the slave ships. And the contrast wasn't that great. It was similar. And so again, the 7 of us in the house where the shootout occurred, and the 4 of us in the house where the shootout did not occur, were all lumped together on conspiracy charges, and we became the RNA 11.
So the Republic of New Africa 11.
11.
So the shootout resulted in one federal agent being killed.
No, one local police being killed,
Okay.
one federal agent being shot,
Okay.
and a local police being shot.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but the conspiracy charges. See, initially we were charged with treason, leveling war against the state of Mississippi, conspiracy, murder, and then an sundry of gun charges as well, other charges as well. So I'm not sure how many charges were there. And of course, this was a time when the death penalty was alive and well in Mississippi. The electric chair was still operational. So because of the conspiracy aspect, several of us went on trial for murder. I was the first to go on trial for murder because they said that they, through their forensic, determined that I fired the weapon that killed the police. I don't know how they could do that, but, that's what they did.
So they said that you were responsible for the murder of that police officer. They pinned that on you.
They pinned that on me.
What was the status of Mama Tamu when the arrest was made? So you all were arrested.
Right.
But what happened with the sisters?
Conspiracy.
Okay, so they had the charges as well.
They had as well. Now, luckily, that part of their charge was weak. And Tamu, you got out, and how much time did you spend?
I spent 10 months incarcerated.
Okay. And that was between Jackson, the Hinds County jail, and then you went to another jail as well.
Actually, I went through to several jails there. I went, of course, to Hinds County, to Parchman, to Meridian, and there was one other one that I can't remember. But that one, the brothers didn't go to. I don't think you all went to Meridian either. No. But, yeah, I went to several jails. And also I wanted to say that the other sister that was in the house was pregnant at the time. And so she was eventually released. And there was another sister in the other house where the shooting did not take place. She was able to be released very early in the game.
Okay.
Mhm.
The
She-
sister that was expecting when the arrest was made,
Mhm.
was she still incarcerated when she gave birth? Or
No.
Was she, okay, so
No,
she was out.
no, let me backtrack. The first sister to get out, who was not in the house with us, she had a relatives who was a big-time attorney from New York, and he was able to come down, and I don't know how, but he was able to get her out very soon. But the other sister, who was pregnant, she was able to get out because of her pregnancy, and so it just left me.
But she was roughed up,
Yeah.
and there was some complications because of the maltreatment. So in 1972, I went on trial. In
Death penalty trial
death penalty case,
in the state of Mississippi.
Yeah.
In 1971.
72. The shootout occurred in 71, but the trial was in 72. And at that time, the pressure and all of facing the death penalty, if you see pictures of me then, I was very frail and had lost weight and everything. But anyway,
They sprayed you in the face, remember?
but that was afterwards.
Oh,
That was after when we at Parchman. So an all-white jury, save one elderly black man. And so the jury came back with a verdict of guilty. But it was in 2 phases. In the sentencing phase and the penalty phase. In the penalty phase, they could not find themselves to take my life. So I ended up with life in prison without parole. And then the following year were the federal trials. But again, between my trial and the federal trials, there were other state trials.
Right.
So not only did I get a life sentence, Ofaga got a life sentence, Karim got a life sentence, and then there were other lesser charges. Artist didn't get a life sentence, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, okay. But there were lesser charges. In other words, the evidence clearly indicated myself and the other brothers who got life sentences being in a self-defense mode. So life sentence without parole, and of course there was only one prison in the state of Mississippi. That was Parchman Prison Farm. For those of us who looked at the movie Life with Eddie Murphy and I'm not sure the other people, it's very descriptive of Parchman. It was an environment where inmates had guns, and they were the ones who, if you were out of lines, they shot you, you know. And so it was a farm. When I first got there, I pulled cotton. When you pick it when it's nice and white, they call that picking cotton. And later on, when you go get the scraps, when it's in the fall and the leaves are brown, you call it pulling cotton. So I did that at Parchman Prison Farm. But federally, any number of us got time as well, including Brother Imari, who was in the other house on conspiracy charges, and Tawab, who was in the other house, who got time on conspiracy charges. And so we ended up with 15 years on top of the state time, and that was a blessing. Because what ended up happening is that because of the federal time, it allowed us to eventually get out of the state situation. But I don't want to go there yet. But what I want to do is reflect on Tamu.
Okay.
Tamu got out in 10 months. She could have gone anywhere. She could have done anything. But her commitment to family, you know, here I am. I've got a life sentence without parole and 15 years on top of that. And she wants to build a family. Now,
She got out and see her commitment.
yeah. So I'm in no position to say no, right? But I'm not seeing what she's saying. I'm saying, ain't no way in the world I'm gonna get out of this. I know they got a graveyard already dug at the farm for me, because that's what happens. People with natural life sentences are buried for the most part on the farm, unless their families get their bodies and bring them home. So there's a cemetery there. You know, it's already got my name on it. But that ain't what she sees. She sees a family. Now, it's just the two of us. We don't have a family yet. And so I don't know what she sees, you know, but she's committed. You know, she's all in.
So what was on your mind, Mama Tamu? Baba Hekima is obviously been convicted, life sentence plus 15 years, and you get it in your mind. I mean, you obviously, like Baba Hekima says, you see something else. You see something else, and you're going by what you see. So talk to us a little bit about what you saw that prompted you to take action.
I don't know. I guess I had rose-colored glasses on. And it's kind of hard to explain. It's just that it didn't faze me in terms of how long he had. I knew he would be there for a while, but I knew he was coming home. And I guess my thing in terms of building a family is that I got to do this while I can, and because who knows when he's going to come home. So, you know, we got to go ahead and live. We can't, you know, we're going to live until we die. And that's the way I wanted to live. I wanted to have these children, and, you know, we'd be there when he comes home. So it was.
So you was making visits.
Oh yeah, we had.
You was getting, you know what they had back then?
The conjugal visits.
Conjugal visits,
Mhm.
sleepover visits.
Right.
We had that too, but
You
you.
said, well, I'm gonna make this family because I'm
Yeah.
for him to come home and take
Absolutely, absolutely.
care of it. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, you had visits where you can go and it was kind of weird because you'd see sisters coming with their blankets and stuff, or the brothers carrying them from there wherever they were, and you just went in these little houses and stayed there for a period of time, and then somebody else would go in there. So, and then you also had what we call the 3-day visit, where you can come and actually live with your husband for 3, blissful days, and one of the little places that they had, it was really neat. It was like a motel type of things, like with like 3 or 4 apartments right there. Now those were really nice, but they also had these real big houses that were old, kind of decrepit, like the windows didn't have screens and just open windows, and stuff. So those weren't very nice, but as long as we were together, it was nice.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we would, every time he would get an opportunity to have his 3-day visit, we were there. I went so much that back then, when you get your airline ticket, you went to the airline, one of their offices and bought your ticket, or I guess you could go to the airport. But however, I would go downtown in Wisconsin, and I would go to the Delta, their office, and get my tickets. And a young lady asked me, she says, "Do you have a job in Mississippi?" I said, "No. Why do you ask?" She said, "Well, you seem to go so often." So I did. I made quite a few trips. I always say that our oldest daughter, when she was, by the time she had when she was 2, she had a flight for every month of her age. That's considered going there and back. Yeah. So.
But you also moved to Mississippi.
I did. First of all, when I was released, I went back to school, and I got my degree and everything in education, and I started working, and then I had an opportunity to move to Mississippi, so I did. By this time, we'd had 2 daughters, and I moved to Mississippi. Job with the at a university in Itabena, Mississippi, and before that, though, I was, in my mind, I thought it would be really cool if I would move on the prison farm, because they had educators there, for the guys. And I thought, wow, then we could really have a nice family. And of course, he said, "No way." And my mom was like, you ain't going on no farm. But anyway, but I mean, I considered that. And but then, again, as I said, moving there, it was, we got a little apartment, and we could make our visits every weekend.
So you decide, Mama, that you ain't waiting. You're going to start a family.
Absolutely.
And you begin to have children.
Absolutely.
While Baba Hekima is in prison, serving a life sentence plus 15 years.
Yeah.
You start a family.
Right. Some might call it insane, but I thought it was just the most normal thing in the world.
Now, when you got out, you didn't just go back home. You also fought for us.
Absolutely. I certainly
for
did.
political prisoners in general.
Right.
Barnstorming around the country with Angela Davis and other people.
Right.
Because a lot of us were incarcerated around the country
Right.
as a result of the war on us and the youth in our movement.
Right. When they interviewed me in Mississippi the day that I got out, I remember saying that I would leave no stone unturned for getting these brothers out. I would just give my life to that. And that's kind of what I did. I did go, like I said, I went back to school, but I was also, traveling and speaking on their behalf.
So you went on a campaign to bring awareness to the plight of the RNA 11 and to raise funds.
Yes,
for
absolutely.
their defense.
Absolutely, I sure did.
All the while having children.
All the while, having children. I did slow down after the children came, but I would still eat. What would happen is that the brothers would call me if they needed a sister to go and speak, because a lot of times the brothers would speak, but if they would need a sister to go to speak, it was two of us that they would send out. And, so I would go at every opportunity that I got.
So what were you thinking, Baba Hekima? Mama Tamu tells you that the two of you are now expecting a child. Again, you are serving a life sentence plus 15 years, and she decides to start a family.
Well, I'm not so sure all the feelings. One of the things that I reflect on that people around my mother would say, well, now you're not going to have any grandchildren. And that weighed heavily on me. I'm an only child. And for people around my mother to say to her that she's never going to have any grandchildren, well, Tamu proved them wrong, of course, obviously. And so that was a joy. And of course, my first two children were able to come to Parchment and be with me. Shay was only able to come to visit me after I was in the federal custody. But so it's, again, it's kind of unreal in some respects because I don't have any idea of how I would ever join them. And so it's a mixed kind of situation. You're joyful, but you're sorrowful too because you don't see the opportunity to join them.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
My question goes for Shay. How does it feel, Shay, when you learn later on in the years that you were one of the children that your mother wanted to bring life to and bring forth to the world? How does it feel when you hear the story of your mother and your father?
To be honest with you, I'm probably not going to be able to say much. I'm extremely proud, for them to be my parents. And every time I hear their story, as you can see, it's really emotional just to think of the sacrifice that they made for African people. And for my mother to have the vision that she had and the want that she did for a family is just, it's beyond me. It's like unreal. And one thing that probably makes me very emotional is that when we were younger, I know my eldest sister is 5 years older than me. Their middle child, my sister right above me, Noni, she and I, when we were younger, couldn't look at the pictures of my father and what they did to him while he was in prison. So I'm extremely proud, but I don't think that there'll ever be a time in my life that this doesn't happen, because when you think of the people who nurtured you, taught you, loved you, your mommy and your daddy had this type of energy, love, fortitude for their people. It's just an amazing, amazing thing. So, that's it.
Just like Shay said, as often as I hear the story and I replay it in my mind all the time, I'm amazed as well, to know that when somebody mentions the name Baba Hekima and Mama Tamu, the word that comes to mind to me that really encapsulates them is sacrifice. If there was one word that I would use to describe them and what they mean to our people, is sacrifice. And to be able to come together to tell this story, our story, is like one of the most powerful experiences that I think I have personally had. And I know many of the viewers and eventually the hundreds of thousands of people that will see this video via YouTube will walk away knowing that there are people right in our midst that have sacrificed so much, whose names we may not even know, whose story we may not even know. So you talk about elders, and these are the types of people that we have among us. And so we stand on their shoulders while they're still here in the physical realm. We stand on their shoulders because not only, and we'll get back to the story because it's Mama Tamu and the campaign that she went on to free her husband, all the while having children. She goes on a national campaign to bring awareness to their plight, but to also raise funds, right? And their relationship with Baba Chokwe Lumumba, who eventually became the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, the same town where the shootout happened. He was also your defense attorney. Am I right about that? Or he had some role?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Tamu, her name, Hekima, and my name, was given to us by Chokwe in a naming ceremony. So yeah, he during my trial, I think he was still in law school. But anyway, he participated on the defense team for us. Exactly. Now, one of the things, and I'm not sure how much time we got here, one of the things that's a mystery to people is to how you eventually got out. Right. And I want to make sure that people don't assume that we made some kind of deal to get out of prison. Right. It wasn't that, And so the prisoners in Mississippi had come together with their attorneys to go into federal court and charge the state of the prison with being overpopulated. Okay. And so Parchman Prison Farm was under a federal court order to depopulate. They had to get rid of the numbers. And so the prison administration made a blanket decision that they would release all of the inmates who had time to serve in other jurisdictions. Administratively, that included us. It was never supposed to include us. Right. So the federal prison bus came to pick us up, those of us who were at Parchman at that time, and brought us to Atlanta Federal Penitentiary here. The very next day, we were back in Parchman. Because once the word got out that the RNA prisoners had been released, and I'm sure some people lost their jobs around that, but we were back in state custody the very next day. Our attorneys went to work in federal court, and our position was that Mississippi, once they allowed us to leave the state of Mississippi under the jurisdiction of the feds, they could never get us back.
So them bringing you back to Parchman was illegal?
No.
Essentially?
Them releasing us to the feds. Okay. In other words, letting us out.
Right, exactly. I got you.
And so we were able to prevail on that argument. We won a technicality. So they relinquished jurisdiction and could never get it back. All right. Now, the feds also committed an error. They should have never released us back to Mississippi. So the time we spent back in Mississippi had to count for federal time. They wouldn't allow the feds to lose jurisdiction, but the court ruling was that when our federal time started, when they released us to federal custody, Mississippi could never get us back. And the time that we did spend, more than a year, back in Mississippi, I'm not sure how long it was, but that time counted towards federal time. So when we won our case in federal court that the state of Mississippi had lost jurisdiction on us, then we went back to federal court to begin, not to start serving the time, but just to finish out the little time that we had still left. And so I was paroled from federal custody in 1980. And again, my federal time was all spent here in Atlanta. And it was at that time that I made a decision to broker with Tamu and our children for us to move to Atlanta. So when I got out in 80, we spent a year in Wisconsin, and then in 81 we moved to Atlanta. And we've been here ever since. But again, my two older daughters visited me at Parchman. Allenda, my oldest daughter, visited several times. Noni, I don't think, visited but one time. She visited quite a few times. But I remember her. There's a crazy thing that happens at Parchman, similar to Angola. They have the rodeo.
Right.
The crazy thing where inmates put themselves in front of these bulls and everything else to be maimed. But I just remember Noni at the prison rodeo running through my legs. But again, Shay visited me at the farm. I mean, at the federal prison here in Atlanta. And one of the things I reflect on all the time, the shootout with the firepower that the police and the FBI had, it was miraculous that we survived. Then the death penalty case, it was miraculous that we survived that without having gone to the electric chair. And then the prison stay itself, it was to be for a lifetime. We survived that. And for myself, I was involved in an automobile accident not too long ago. And one of my wife's cousins is a trucker. And he was listening to the dispatch and hearing the announcements to truckers and to people on those CB radios. Avoid this area, there's been a fatal fatality. There's a wreck. That was me, but I survived it. And so it often comes up in my mind that the ancestors have saved me for some reason. So I best be mindful of what I do and be thankful, in fact. But in 1980, got out a very precious brother, Joe Brooks, his African name is Yusuf, who picked me up from the prison. He's a brother who had written an article that got published nationally about black land loss in the South. And he got $1 million grant to help black farmers in the South maintain their land. And the agency was the Emergency Land Fund. And so he picked me up, took me to the bus station, and I rode the bus to Milwaukee to meet my family. And when we came back to Atlanta, I was paroled here, and my job was with the Emergency Land Fund, the brothers who had picked me up. And so that was my first immersion into the cooperatives and the farmers in the South. And so we were thinking cooperative then in 1981 when we first moved to Atlanta. And so that became dormant for a while until, we got together and began to think through the mechanics of how we would raise an institution to answer the economic imperative that we talk about. But I just marvel at the fact, I remember what's the brother here at Georgia State University, Asa Hilliard. There's a video when he talks about a love story where one of his ancestors, after emancipation, walked from, in Georgia maybe it was, all the way out west and crossed the Mississippi on foot to find his mate. And so there are those stories. And of course, I have to look at my wife and, and know that her story needs to be told. She's still trying to write a book about it. But she ends up being so involved in the community, she doesn't have time to write. And, so I don't know how she'll ever do it, but somebody else has to grab a hold of her and to make that happen.
Mama Tamu, I definitely want you to offer some closing words for the sisters, because your story is so powerful and your example is so powerful as well. What would you say, or what do you say to sisters all over the country and all over the world, to them, to just let them know, the greatness of that African woman, that spirit, that once you get it in your mind to do, there is really nothing that will stop you?
Well, I guess if you have the spirit of our people, of our ancestors, you have the love of family, that's your ammunition, and that's what keeps you strong. And I don't say, because some people would say, well, as long as you love a person, that's what'll do it. And I don't say to. I think you have to also love yourself and some other, and as I said, love black people, love, what you're doing, because it's not just the love of that individual. If you have a righteous person and you believe in them that they are a righteous person with a righteous cause, and you love them, I think that together will be the building blocks that you need. And then again, as I said, if you love family. So.
Now, Shay, how long have you been married?
45 years will be 46 this summer.
46 years this summer.
I finally found somebody to beat me.
46 years this summer.
Yeah, all right. Not Shay.
So, brothers and sisters, this is why Brother Sanetta and I had to title this An African Love Story. This serves as an excellent example of black love and something that we should really marvel in, that we have these people among us, that we are able to sit at their feet and gain so much of their wisdom and insight on not only the history of our movement, but the history of what brought them together under the banner of African liberation. This is another Sonetta exclusive. Brother Sonetta here in Atlanta, along with the board of Us Lifting Us, and we want to thank you for watching. All of you who will eventually tune in to the YouTube upload, you can find out more about us at our website at usliftingus.com. That's usliftingus.com. Thank you, family.
Peace. Thank you. Beautiful.
All right. Yeah, I've never seen that picture. Never seen that.
At a drive, man.
Yeah, we got to. Yeah, because we got to stop by the hotel and get some equipment and make it on our way. But luckily, we're only 30 minutes away from where we got to go. So, yeah, let's get it.
I had a good time, man.
Do you have
I had a
more
good
than one
weekend, brother. For real.
Well, hey, this is just the beginning.
He has the original.
So we got everything.
I'll be back.
That's
Okay.
the only copy I have. But it needs to be copied from the original, any copy.
Of this? Or from
The
the
original publication.
Can we get a copy of, even though it's a copy of a copy, can we still get a couple of those made?
I'll talk to him, he can make the copy. It'll be identical.
Kind of